Radiohead's Thom is bringing star status to a new climate protection campaign called The Big Ask, which was launched today by Global 2000 and Friends of the Earth in Brussels. Well, I spoke with Thom earlier on this morning and asked him to explain the background to all of this.
We're launching a campaign to try and get 17 countries within the EU to commit to binding targets to reduce their carbon emissions year on year, with strict penalties if they don't. And we're trying to encourage people to sort of basically get involved in writing to their MPs and the traditional use of democracy and getting them to encourage their governments to take this on. And it sort of stems from a campaign that started in the UK, which has been working quite well, and we're about to pass a bill in the next few months, which commits us to some pretty serious targets with a very powerful committee of non-business stooges who are going to look after it. So what we're hoping is that that's an inspiration for people within Europe who are concerned about climate change to follow suit. You know, unless we have legal structures in place, it's all going to be basically picking and choosing, and any sort of firm commitments are going to unravel. And I think it needs to come from the ground up, really.
Most by now agree with this issue, but it still doesn't appear very high on anyone's political agenda. Airport runways are still being expanded. Governments seem to look the other way at polluters. I'm just wondering, why is this issue still being ignored?
Well, I think what's interesting is that when you start to have the mayor of California and the mayor of London and Paris and Barcelona and all these places committing firmly to action to the extent that they can do, and you have people on the ground demanding action, and you have the media talking about it, the last people left are government. And I think personally that the reason for that is that government is lobbied heavily by the polluting industries and so on, who obviously is in their interest for things to stay as they are, but that's a denial of the situation. So what we have at the moment is a lot of empty talk and not much real sort of action, you know.
You are today lobbying in Brussels, helping to launch this campaign. Clearly, these kinds of issues to do with climate are something that are hugely important for you personally, aren't they?
Yeah, they still, like many of my friends and anybody I know who have kids, it's a difficult thing to, you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. You look into the eyes of your children and you hope that they grow up in a future that doesn't have riots for fuel and environmental constant floods and infrastructure collapse. You hope that as an adult, the last opportunity, this little window opportunity that you can say in your heart of hearts, you've tried to use that constructively and make this happen so that your kids have got a future. Politicians and governments greenwashing themselves, talking the talk, but doing very little as far as climate's concerned. Well, obviously, it's a big issue. I mean, as far as I'm aware, in the UK, the politicians in the UK are getting very adept at saying they're doing something when they're doing nothing. But I think the truth of the matter is a law is still a law. If you pass a law in a country, then people are committed to it. And apparently we have functioning democracies in Europe, so therefore if a law is passed, demanded by the people, then governments must follow that law. And it would also very much counterbalance the level of lobbying that's going on, generally speaking, at the moment within the EU against watering down targets and so on. So the thing I must mention is that, you know, if people want to know what they can do personally, they're supposed to go on to thebigask.eu, and that's got all the info. And it's very much like, you know, the idea is a grassroots thing from the ground up, you know, not like big publicity stunts apart from this launch and things. The idea is tapping into people's concerns. I know for a fact that in Britain it's become a complete national obsession. I assume that's the case within Europe to varying degrees, and I think that people, rather than having a dull sense of panic that there's nothing that can be done, I think the positive thing I hope about the campaign in Europe is saying to people, look, if we put structures in place now, if we embrace this now, then it's like setting up a structure that we can build on. You know, if we don't set up a structure we can build on, you forget it. It's never going to happen. I think we all have to sort of delve into our consciences and say, well, if it just means writing a few letters or what, meeting my MP, well, A, that would be a novelty, and B, maybe something will happen positively from that. It's a relatively simple thing to do, but the ramifications of having these laws are huge. You know, it means that then business and stuff gets to look to the future with some understanding of what's occurring, other than this sort of constant sense of dull panic and doom.
Thom And we'll hear more about this particular campaign that's being launched.